Yeah, and maybe we talk about that now because you look at NFTs for the metaverse and then the multiverse. Maybe before we jump there, how do you define the metaverse? Like when your parents say, what's going on with these NFTs, how do you explain the metaverse to them?
Yeah, I mean, people are using the word metaverse or multiverse. We can just kind of call it all one thing. I mean, some people are saying, oh, we're making a metaverse, like Roblox is a metaverse, right? But the way we see it, it is the ability for many different worlds to connect together. So that's digital worlds like video games. You have a video game world, it's a fantasy land, and you have this one where it's a sci-fi universe. And then, you have websites, you have marketplaces, you have social networks, and even the physical world. Connecting those together and being able to use your identity and the things that you own across many of these different worlds. So we actually did an experiment a few years back, probably 2018. We started, talking to a lot of game developers, bringing some game developers on, showing them let's do something with these NFTs. We created a bunch of NFTs like a hammer, a sword, a shield, and we said, hey, is there any way you guys can all use this in your different games? And these are completely different games. Some of them are sci-fi, 3D adventure games. One of them is a pixelated, fighting game where you have fantasy characters with wooden swords. Across about 7 or 8 of these games in the beginning, people started implementing it. So when you get the metal sword in the fantasy game, it's a magic sword. When you get it in the sci-fi game, it shoots, electricity. And it looks similar in each game, but it behaves slightly differently. In one game, it's 3D, and in another game, it's a little pixelated sword. And so we had like 7, 8 games of using these same items, and people could get one NFT, and then they'd want to explore all the different games. Now we have about 30 games using these same items after a few years. So I think that was an interesting experiment, and we could see this extend as Facebook launches Meta, for example. You want to be able to go and have your digital swag, your clothes, your fashion, things like that shown in that world. And you want them to transfer into different worlds as you move around.
Yeah, is that almost composability in the NFT space?
Composability is I guess, a little bit different. It's basically being able to have an NFT that has other NFTs on it. So let's say you have a pet in a game. You can put a hat on the pet, and you can give it, an armor, or you can give it different things. You can have a sword where you put gems in it, and it becomes an enchanted sword, things like that. But yeah, we basically want people to be able to take their identity, take their items, move around the digital world. And it's going to be very weird and difficult in the first few years, I think, because everyone's thinking in this walled garden mindset still, right? Every game is its own little creation, and they don't think about extending into other games. But as these new protocols develop, and as metaverses start becoming, a thing, and everyone wants to connect everything, you're going to be able to move around this digital space, have your identity follow you, have your history be logged, and have full ownership of that.
That's so cool to think about. You mentioned Facebook's Meta. What do you make of this? Good, bad, something to look out for, upside, downside?
Oh, that's a huge one to unpack. So I think it's great. I saw this when they first purchased Oculus, right? I was like, wow, Zuckerberg is a genius. So he knows that VR is going to be huge in the future. And I was a huge VR fanatic. I had the first Oculus developer kit and the second one, and then the consumer set, and now I have the Quest 2. And so I can see that these VR worlds are powerful, and Facebook wants to push this. We see VR, AR, all this stuff happening in the future, but it's kind of scary because I've looked at a lot of studies. If you look up studies on VR and the effect it has on the brain, it's kind of startling. Like we've seen what Facebook did with they did some experiments with people's news feeds where they would kind of slightly modify what you see, on somebody's news feed, maybe slightly negative articles. That person would start feeling bad. You give somebody slightly more positive articles, just slightly tweak the algorithm. The person starts feeling better, more, happier, more positive in life. And that is just child's play compared to what you can do in VR. They've done studies where when you put on a VR headset and you go look in a mirror and you're Einstein, you're suddenly Einstein. Your IQ goes up. You do an IQ test in that VR world, you're suddenly smarter. This is like remarkable that it can just change your brain like that just by seeing yourself as a different person in VR. So that you can use that for a lot of positive things, but it could also be used for, if it changes your brain in that way, it could be used for some scary things. They've done experiments on rats where, they were able to actually shut down the hippocampus of the brain when a rat was in a VR world. And so, that's kind of scary, but they're trying to use that to maybe non-invasively treat, certain conditions, epilepsy, mental disorders. So, this is a technology that can have significant impacts on your brain. So we want to make sure that, whatever world this turns into, we don't know what it's going to look like in a few years, but, it'll probably start with being able to jump into Meta, talk with your friends, do things at work with your colleagues. Then it'll expand and become more realistic and more kind of all-consuming, I think. You'll have AR glasses probably from Apple in the next few years. We want to make sure that you have your sense of identity. You have some sort of control and power in that world, and you're not just being kind of fed whatever the corporations want to feed you, right?
Wow, yeah, you make some really powerful observations. I mean, imagine that's the effect of a news feed, which is, 10 headlines. And then imagine a VR world with so much subtlety that, it's another 10,000 orders of magnitude of the experience and how it could be tweaked and A/B tested to get a variety of results. I put on an Oculus headset last year. A bunch of people at the office got crazy about it, and we all got them. And I went on the Jurassic Park ride, and I went over the waterfalls and someplace in Africa. And the funny thing, actually, the menu room was one of my most calm, peaceful places, because it was like this beautiful house overlooking this place that looked like Rio de Janeiro, and it was just like a swinging chair in the background. And I just found it like super peaceful just to be in there. It was a very strange experience. And obviously, Mark really saw way ahead of the future. I mean, did he get Oculus back in '08 or something? I mean, it was a real early investment in the technology, and rebranding to Meta is probably the best single piece of free press the entire blockchain industry could get, right? Because now everyone knows that word, but I guess the danger is that the control will become, 360 degrees, and that's a little dangerous.
Well, Facebook wants to do this the right way. They mentioned crypto in the original announcement, right? They mentioned blockchain. But obviously, people will jump to the easiest thing. They'll jump to buying an Oculus device or whatever the next device is, and just, jumping to Facebook's experience. But, at least Facebook wants to open up the doors. They want to have an open API. They've done a lot of good things in the software space where they've developed tools for software developers. So, we want to ensure that there's going to be some centralized metaverses like Facebook and all these different games and game stores out there, but we also want a decentralized world. So when things don't go the way that people want in the centralized world, or governments put on, extreme regulations or tell you what you can or cannot do in that digital world, you can jump to the decentralized world, and you can jump to the blockchain that supports your values, right? Whether that's sort of libertarian values, free speech, or whatever you believe in, you can jump to that. And that's really, what Satoshi was talking about in the first place with Bitcoin. The freedom, that code is law, right? What's in the code? You jump to the network that you want to live in and want to experience.